Hey guys, Vishal here, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a simple color game using JavaScript and HTML. So our final product should be looking something like this. It should have a title saying color game, and then whenever I press the start game button, it should give us a random background color, and then when I type in the name of the color in the text box and press enter, it should give us a message saying good job, and then it should give us the time it took to enter in the color in milliseconds. So today we're going to be using Notepad++ to code this. And first you want to make a new project, and you should have a skeleton looking something like this. You can just copy what I have on the screen right now. And the first thing we're going to be doing is labeling or giving our game a title on top of the screen. And the way we can do that is making an h1 tag with color game inside of it, and it'll just give us our title of color. The next thing you want to do is make all of our buttons, text boxes, and output divs. So our first button, start game, will have a type button, and then on the button it'll be labeled start game, and then we'll link it with the function called start game. And we can do the same thing for enter button, and I have an instructions button up here, but I won't be going into that in this video. But if you want to implement this instructions button on your own, you can. And then we also have a text box, which will just take in the input for the color we type in. And then we also have a div to display the messages we want. So next thing we're going to be doing is typing in our script tag. And we're first going to code our start game function. And basically what you want to do is you want to type in function, our start game. And the next thing you want to do is don't worry about the reset function yet. I'll be going to that later. That's for a timer we'll use, but the first thing you want to write is our id div output.innerHTML equal to empty brackets. Basically what this does is every time we press the start game button, it'll clear the div with any messages it has. And then the second thing you want to do is generate a random number, because that's how we'll be changing the background to a random color every time we press the start button. So the way we do that is we can create our own variable called num, and then in it we can have a math.random function which displays the number between 0 and 1, and then we'll be multiplying that by 6, and then we'll be rounding that number to an integer. So basically what this will give us is a number between 0 and 6, and the reason we have a number between 0 and 6 is because we'll be having 7 colors. So the next thing you want to do is we're going to make a global variable called color. And this will basically store whatever random color is on the screen right now when you press start game. So it will be using a bunch of if and else if statements to generate a random background. So if our random number is equal to 0, for instance, we're going to change the background to red. And this is the hexadecimal number for red. And then we'll be setting our variable color equal to red. And we're going to do that the same thing for green, blue, yellow, orange, purple, and brown, and with their respective hexadecimal values. So you could basically change this into any color you want. You just have to maybe search it up on Google what each color's hexadecimal value is. And then don't worry about the start function yet. I'll get into that after we make our timer. So the next thing we want to do is make our enter function for enter button, because every time we want to input a color or input our value from our text box, we're going to press the enter button. So we're going to implement our enter function next. So just like above your start game function, you can type in your enter function first. And the first thing you want to do when you press our enter button is get the answer from the text button. So we're going to make a variable called answer and then set it equal to the value of the text area. The next thing you want to do is compare this answer to whatever the color of the background is right now. So that's why we made our variable color a global variable, so that we could use it in this enter function and also in our start game function. So first thing we want to do is compare our color. If it's correct, we'll display a message saying good job and then plus our time, which I'll talk about later. And then we also want to just reset everything. So we're going to clear the text box value into empty quotations. And then we also want to set the background color back to white. But if the answer is incorrect, if the user types in, say, yellow when the background's orange, the div will display a message saying you failed. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is finally make our timer. So first thing we want to do is make two variables. And these will be global variables because we're going to use them in our enter and start game function. So the first variable we have is called time elapsed. And basically this variable is a counter, which will be incremented in one of our functions. And then our variable called myTimer is basically just a Java timer variable. So the next thing we want to do is make a start function, which will initialize our Java timer called myTimer. It'll set its interval to every 10 milliseconds. You can change this to whatever value you want, but for this video, we're just going to use 10 milliseconds. And basically, it'll call this tick function, which we're going to write after this, to run every 10 milliseconds. So in our tick function, basically, we're going to increment time elapsed every 10 milliseconds. And we're just going to add 10 to it every 10 milliseconds. So yeah, our tick function is pretty simple. And then we're also just going to make another function called stop. And that's because every time when the user gets his color correct, we obviously want to stop the timer and display the value. So we can use the stop function for that. And then the next function we're going to make for a timer is a reset function, because every time the user wants to start a new game, we have to reset our timer variables. Like we're going to set time elapse back to 0 and then just stop our timer. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to call our timer variables in our start and enter function. So in our start function, we're just going to call our reset first. So basically what this will do is every time the start button is pressed, it'll reset our timer variable with the function we created right here. The next thing you want to do is add this line start. So after the random color is generated, we're going to start the color, or start the timer, which will be displayed in our enter function. So after we start the timer, the user has time to type his value into a text box and then press enter. And then in their enter function, when the enter key is pressed, we will be stopping the timer if the answer is correct. So using our stop function, we can call it in our enter function, and it'll stop the timer basically if the answer is correct. The next thing we want to do is display an error message with our time. So in our div output, we can basically change the inner HTML to a message saying good job, and then that will display our time used, our time taken to input the color into the text box, and that time will be in milliseconds. So that's why we made the time elapsed variable a global variable. So the next thing we want to do is obviously we want to make the you failed message too. And then, yeah, we want to reset all of our divs and text boxes in our start game and enter function, which we did. And we're also just resetting the background color back to white. So yeah, that's basically it for this video. And I'll show you guys one more time how the output should look. So basically when we press start game, the message should reset. And the background color right now is green. So if I type in green into the text box and press enter, it'll say good job with the message saying it took us 11 seconds or 11 seconds to type it into the text box. And then just to show you one more time, when we press start game, that message should go away. And then also when we type in a color saying green and press enter, our text box should clear, as you can see. So yeah, that's how you make a simple color game using Notepad++. And the languages we used were JavaScript and HTML. So hope you enjoyed.